I'm very, very happy about being able to bring this topic to you and this particular presenter. How many of you really value building your network? Good. And how many of you work at that regularly? Well, I am an avid networker. I love networking, and I think I'm pretty good at it. And it's something that I always want to expand my network to include fabulous people, and we have so many of them all over our organization. And through my network, I was introduced to our speaker today. So somebody I'm very close to in my network said, there's this fabulous woman on campus and you need to meet her and you're going to love her and she does great work and I think you two will really hit it off. And she set up a meeting for the three of us. And that was over a year ago? Yeah. And we were at that time working on a different project that I thought I would be able to use her on. And that didn't go where we thought it would at that point in time, at least. But a year later, when I was planning for this event, she immediately came to my mind as the perfect person to present at our first Wisdom Cafe Live. So you never know what your network is going to do and where it's going to lead you and what connections you can make from that. But I'm really fortunate that I was able to make this connection. So I want you to meet Jennifer Selke. She has a couple different roles on campus, and you have the bio on your flyer there with some of those details. In the graduate school, teaching education, grad students in education, and also running camps at rec sports. Two very, very interesting, different kinds of things that she does for our campus. But she is an expert on using strengths for your growth, the growth mindset, and particularly the assessment Strengths Finder. So we're going to talk more at the end of today's session about our follow-up session, which is going to be specifically about Strengths Finder. And she's got a great resource for you to be able to take that assessment if you haven't and bring your results to our next session. So we'll tell you more details about that at the end. But now we want to talk about today's session, using your strengths for job satisfaction and professional growth. And please help me welcome Jennifer Selke.
Thank you. What if you could spend most of your day using your strengths? Now, I have a question to start out with. What's the percent of people that get to use their strengths every day at work? Gallup does a lot of research and polling and has figured out the percent of people that get to use their strengths most of the time at work. So when you think of, out of 100 people, think to yourself, how many do you think would report that they get to use their strengths most of the time? So when you think about that, everybody got a number in their head? 2 out of 10. 2 out of 10. 20% of people report that they get to use their strengths most of the time at work. That means 80% of the U.S. population is not using their strengths. I mean, think economically what that means. Even to our university, who is really looking at ways to save money, if we have, even if, conservatively, we have 60% of the people that are not using their strengths most of the day. We have a lot of untapped potential here at the university. What I'd like you to do in your areas, and you can form groups of 2 or 3. I think the chairs will be able to spin around. In a moment, I'm going to show you some pictures, but these are the questions that I want you to answer in your groups of 2 or 3. First of all, just share your name. What prompted you to come to this workshop? And then I'm going to give you a picture, and you're going to think, what picture represents what it's like to use your strengths? So this doesn't mean you've taken the Strength Finder and know what your strengths are, but you probably have some idea of what you're good at, about what people have told you, wow, you're really good at that. You've often gotten feedback, you've gotten directed in that way. So when you think about, God, what it's like when I'm getting to do the things I do best, what does that feel like for me? There's going to be a picture you're going to have to associate with that and then share that with your group. So name, I'm going to have to leave it on the picture, so you're going to try to memorize this. Name, what prompted you, why are you here, and then what picture represents how it feels like for you to use your strengths. Okay, got that? And somebody in your group of 3, this is where teamwork works out best. Somebody will have remembered some of the questions. All right, here's your pictures. And, it's just metaphorical, whatever struck you of, glasses is what it feels like to use my strengths. Maybe because I focus in on, really what it is I do well. So whatever that is for you. So I'm going to give you about 6 minutes or so to turn and talk, either partners or triples, depending on where you are and how that works out, to share that bit of information. And then I'll make sure you give everybody a turn. And then I'll give you a 2-minute warning. So make sure you give everybody a turn. How many of you have taken the Clifton Strength Finder? How many of you? Great. How many of you manage people? You have some people that you're responsible for. Got it. Great. As the work that I've done at UC Berkeley really started back when I came here for graduate school in 1993. And the work that I had done prior to that was in the military running after school programs. I was in a military base in England and came here to study school psychology. And that first summer where you're looking for a job, I had never been to California, much less lived here, didn't have any connections here to the Bay Area. And so I started asking around, and the person sitting next to me in statistics class had actually worked in the after-school programs at Strawberry Canyon and said, hey, they have a summer camp, you might be interested, and of course, that's what I felt I knew how to do. And I started that first summer in '94 over at Golden Bear at the top of Dwight Way. I mean, this is the amazing view our kids have at lunch. And I'm basically in the same position that I was in 1994. I'm at the same desk. I'm in the same office. Not a lot has changed for me. Some of you may be familiar with our youth programs. With the camps that I run, we have about 2,000 kids at camps in the summer and about 150 staff. And during my time here, I studied under Nadine Lambert and worked in school psychology, ended up with a school psychology credential. And I worked a lot for a while in the schools while I was still running camps, working with kids who were really frustrated, kids who were sort of wedged into the education system, and we weren't really using their strengths. I did a lot of assessments. I was at Iron Horse Middle School in San Ramon for about 12 years doing assessments for special ed. And if you're a 7th or 8th grader and you've gotten that far in life without being diagnosed with a learning disability and you're now starting to have trouble, often you are pretty smart and you've just finally maxed out on your ability to use the rest of your brain to compensate, and education has caught up with you. We have this at UC Berkeley where we have students that really sort of powered through high school and they get here and finally ADHD or reading disability, something is finally catching up to them. And so as I would do the assessments, I would see these kids that had this amazing potential that wasn't fitting the school system. That kid that talks way too much in class. And I'm thinking, you are going to have a job talking. I guarantee that. You are going to have a job talking. What we have to do is make sure we direct that skill in a way. And it's kind of a raw talent right now. And you're getting in trouble in class. We want to direct that skill in a way that is going to be useful to you. I had one girl who was an amazing bully. Like, she could pick out and really figure out just what would hurt someone's feelings. And she was, a lot of kids wanted to follow her because, if you're following the bully, it's less likely you'll be teased. And so one of the things I realized is I don't need her to not be this strong-willed kid that was really good at figuring people out. I needed her to use those skills to figure out how to maybe give somebody some positive remark instead of a negative remark. So helping students really embrace what it is they did well, sometimes while they're stuck in a system that is not using their strengths. And I feel like that sometimes applies to us as workers. What really appeals to me, and the only reason I am still here, this will be my 22nd summer running camps, the only reason I'm still here is I had a director of our Department of Rec Sports, Mike Weinberger, who recently retired, who really believed in using people's strengths. He allowed me to continue to adapt that job so that I would stay engaged at work. And for that reason, I have stayed as a UC employee since 1994. Why I do this job is I have 150, mostly millennials, who work at camp. It's often their first job, and I get to help them identify their strengths, figure out what they do well, get them in those positions where they can start to see that they are expert at something, and then help them tell their story so that they can choose a major that fits them, so that they can have interview skills and sort of sell themselves. Because as we know, we want to be able to sell what we really do well and not something we don't do well, because that's the worst thing, right? To get the job in an area that maybe you're competent in, but you absolutely hate. I taught students here at UC Berkeley in the doctoral program in school psychology for a couple of years because I could. It was open to me. I was encouraged to do it. And the first year was amazing. I had a large group, 10, which for a doctoral program is large, and the students were very engaging and amazing. I transitioned the next year into a small group of students, 4 students, that were absolutely outstanding in every way, except I didn't connect with them. And as an introvert, I have relator as a top strength. I really have to connect with people, and there's a small subset of that. And what I found was I was less happy teaching, and I realized I couldn't count on having the students that I picked to be able to engage with to teach. And everybody was surprised when I decided not to keep teaching because you're so good at it. And all I could say was, it doesn't make me happy. It doesn't bring me energy. I don't like it. And so part of how do we get to use our strengths every day, more of the day, when I was teaching, I wasn't using my strengths every day. I wasn't using what I like to do every day. When I'm working at camp and putting young people in positions that they can start to see what they're good at and then help them direct their next career choices so that they know how to pick situations that are going to invigorate them, that's what I love to do. So at a camp where I get to actually pick who I hire and then run Strength Finder workshops, run Strength Finder coaching, and by the way, we have a summer camp going on at the same time, I've been able to do what I love, and that's what helps me be successful. Don Clifton, who's the grandfather of positive psychology in developing, was the person that developed the Strength Finder, was initially working on methods to help companies select the right person. So he would create a questionnaire. There'd be 25 people applying for a position, maybe as a salesperson. They'd give him this questionnaire that would select the best talents of a salesperson, and one person would get the job. And he really started to think, that's great for that one person, but those other 24 people have no idea what they should be doing. They just know they maybe shouldn't be doing that job. That's where he really shifted his focus and wanted to create a measure that would help everybody figure out what their talents are, what they do well, and help them get into those situations. There's a lot of talk about Facebook, and regardless of what you feel about the platform, they have a lot of money to choose to use whatever business system they want. This is from their person in charge of HR, Lori Gohler, who wrote about this book, First Break All the Rules, that people want to have an impact. They want to know what they're working on matters, and they're going to stay at a place where they feel like they have an impact, where they're learning and growing and doing what they love. And this book, First Break All the Rules, was really groundbreaking. My dissertation was on adults with ADHD, specifically around job satisfaction and job tenure. What kind of jobs did adults with ADHD like to have? Where did they stay the longest? And so in those early days, I was choosing to look at how people were satisfied at work. And that would have been a clue to me about kind of what I enjoy doing. And then I read this book, First Break All the Rules, and it really transformed how I managed people. Primarily because this is a book that's done, a lot of Gallup research went behind studying great managers. They surveyed hundreds of thousands of great managers to find out what do they do that makes them great. And they found that great managers do these 4 things. First of all, they select for talent. And I'm halfway through my interviewing for the summer. I think I've hired about 65 people. I have to get to 150. So I'm partway through. And so selecting for talent is a big thing in my position for summer camp. You know, there's talent that goes along with working at a summer camp in terms of your ability to generate energy even when you're tired. To be able to sort of problem solve in novel situations because things change every day. So I have to think about what talent am I looking for and what skills do I train. I can train somebody how to walk a group of 10 kids without, the accordion, they walk, they accordion. I can teach somebody how to do that. That's a skill, not a talent. So selecting for talent is a big piece. Defining the right outcome. So when I talk to staff about this is the outcome I want you to have, I want the program to look like this. Soccer needs to be teaching developmentally appropriate skills. We want kids waiting in line. These are the things that are important to us. I hire a competent person and let them get themselves to that outcome. When you're at work, thinking about, does your manager give you the end goal, but then allow you to figure out how to get there? Or is there sort of micromanaging along the way where you're trying to get things done and you have this great idea and then they're kind of jumping in, no, do it this way. And you're like, well, why don't you just tell me how to do it? And they're like, no, we want you to try to figure it, you have some great ideas. And so you try again. They're like, no, don't do it that way. So this idea of great managers sort of find these talented people, define the outcome, but then empower you to figure out how to get to that outcome. And why that's important in strengths is that the strength finder and understanding your talent isn't going to tell you, oh, you should have been an accountant. You're in student affairs. Oh, you should have been an accountant. It's not going to do that. What it's going to do is tell you that your set of strengths, this is how you're going to do that job in student affairs. Or if you are in accounting or business services, this is how you're going to do that job, not that you should do the job. So this idea of defining outcomes and allowing you to work in your own way is honoring your strengths, is honoring how you need to think about a problem. Great managers also focus on strengths. You can have an 8-fold impact on worker engagement just by talking to your direct reports about their strengths. If that's the only thing you do is talk about strengths with your direct reports, you're increasing their engagement. And then the final thing is finding the right fit. As a manager, I have a lot of leeway over who I put in charge of what areas. And am I really stressing somebody out by putting them in a situation where they require sort of fast on-the-spot thinking when they're maybe a slow, deliberative, they can assess risk, but they need time? I'm going to lose what's best about them if I'm making them rush. Whereas somebody else needs something different every hour and they really are good on the fly and they love being flexible, I'm going to kill them if I make them do 100 timesheets every week. That's a lot of repetitive detail orientation. So it's about finding the right fit for who you're with. As part of my work, Gallup offers a certification now in Strength Finder coaching. And because I love helping young people, and this is one of the things that makes a big difference on them in interviewing and being able to talk about their strengths from a real assessment, I did the certification with Gallup. They also have an education certification, and what's great, if you're really into this, is that they offer a 50% discount to people in education to do the certification. So it's like an $8,000 class that you can get cut in half, which is still a considerable amount of money. But it's amazing that they do that for education. So you may have seen some of these different books. The Strength Finder 2.0 has been a top-selling book at Amazon for the last few years. They've recently come out with a strength-based parenting. And so there's only one Clifton Strength Finder. There's only one assessment. They have a faith-based book. They have one called Leadership Strengths. They have Strength Quest, which is an education. There's only one assessment, that's the Gallup Strength Finder, and they have a lot of different ways into that assessment. The new assessment that they've added is the Entrepreneurial Strength Finder, and that is an assessment that will tell you your entrepreneurial strengths. So some of you may work with students who are thinking about entrepreneurship. You may be thinking, gosh, do I have what it takes to start my own business? This actually assesses you on talents to be an entrepreneur based on all their research. So these are a few things that you might be interested in. But knowing that there's only one Gallup Strength Finder, and what that Strength Finder does is it measures your talents and ranks them from 1 to 34. And on your sheet, you have a list of the 34 talents. These 34 talent themes are ranked when you take the assessment. So you're probably thinking, I know a lot of you took the assessment and you're thinking, I only got 5. What do you mean 34? Because I only know my top 5. Well, the way the Strength Finder breaks down statistically, and that's all Gallup does really well, is statistical analysis, is your top 5 are the ones you use most of the time. There's a drop off at 5, and we still use 6 to 10 pretty heavily. So those are, our top, 8 to 10 are going to be themes we rely on as far as our talents go. There's going to be this middle block that you do kind of use, but they're not your go-to, like the ones in 1 through 10. And they're the ones at the bottom that you really do the least. And so Gallup knows your ranking. You don't have to take the Strength Finder again to get all 34 if you wanted. I like people to really understand their top 5 before they try to look at a full list of 34. But you can pay I think it's like $70, and you can unlock 6 through 34 to be able to do that. The first time you take the Strength Finder is when it's the most valid. So you don't need to think, I'm just going to take it again. That first time you take it is the most valid. So these themes are on your sheet. They're divided up into 4 areas. And so when we think about talents, we have these executing talents, and executing talents are listed. These are the different types of ways people get things done. So some people might, achievers, one of the top talents in the whole database. People with achiever love to make a list and check things off. They actually love done. Done is really motivating to them. So you can see, well, that makes sense that there's an executing theme. But when you think about belief, how's belief an executing theme? Well, some people have a set of values, and it's not necessarily faith-based. They have a set of strong values, and that's what they're motivated to work around. Your value may be all students need to have guidance when they're selecting. Like, I really feel like students need support at a university in order to make decisions. I feel very strongly about student support. That may be a belief that you hold that then drives you to work. Some people's beliefs might be around environmental issues, might be around social justice, might be faith-based. And when you have belief, you want to think about, like, well, what does that mean for me, and how does that motivate me to work? And if my work does not match my belief, and that's a top strength for me, maybe that's why I'm having trouble feeling like I'm not motivated to get things done. So when we think about our strengths, our executing strengths, those are the ones that help us get things done. And they work in different ways. Consistency is a theme. My husband has consistency as a top theme, and it happens to be one of my bottom themes. My husband and I only have one theme that overlaps in our top 10s. So between the two of us, we have 19 different themes represented. And when you think about a team, right, if you're going to be a work team, that's pretty great to have 19 different talents represented. But it also means you have a lot of opposing talents. It's a complementary partnership, and that takes a certain amount of effort to not be aggravated by the other person's strengths. And consistency being one of his top strengths means he is a really great rule follower. He is not a corner cutter. He is somebody who, those corners are kept. And he builds servers for a large financial company in San Francisco. You don't really want a corner cutter building your server. You're like, no, it's fine. We don't need to put that on there today. It'll be good, right? You don't want that. You want somebody who, you don't want your tax accountant to be a corner cutter. So there's certain themes that really work well when they can be a little more rigid. I don't have consistency. I do have achiever, but I have maximizer as well. So my maximizer really likes to get things done. And so I'll cut corners if I need to. 80% is good enough for me. To somebody with consistency, that looks reckless to him because I cut corners. And as I look back, and if you have children or work with kids, some of these strengths are apparent at a young age. I remember probably one of my first corner cutting activities was making macaroni and cheese. My cousin had always made it, and this was my first time. I was about 10. First time on my own making the Kraft boxed macaroni and cheese. Where you have to add the milk, you have to have actually supplies, not like the Velveeta where it's just one and done. And so I'm reading the directions, and it says, boil the water, pasta, 8 to 10 minutes, if desired, drain, add milk, butter, cheese, and I'm like, if desired, drain. Like, why am I going to do that extra step? And I just said, that's crazy. I'm putting in the milk. I'm putting in the cheese, right? You can imagine now what it looks like. It kind of looks like soup. And then I realized there was a period after, like, if desired, it was about how long you cook the pasta, period. Drain, period, right? And I just ran them all together, corner cut, maximize, right? Well, you could see how that sort of work style, alongside someone with consistency, who is, you do not turn the microwave off when there are 3 seconds left, because it said 2 minutes and 30 seconds. I'm like, it's done, right? You can see complementary partnerships are great because he makes sure the iron's off and the doors are locked and bills are paid on to all those important things. And can contribute in ways of getting things done where he might be caught up in too much of the details and it might be harder for him to get things done. But that idea, even in the workplace, we work with people that have complementary strengths to our own. And sometimes it's frustrating because they are doing things in a way that we don't. When we look at our influencing themes here, these are the themes that help you get other people to do things. You know, activator is about getting things going, getting things started. That let's get going excites the group. So imagine activator without achiever, right? You're great about getting everybody excited, but it's not really motivating to you to see that it's done. You're about the start. Well, that could be hard if you're in a job where a manager expects you to be about the finish, right? Because you can do it. It's just not about using your strengths most of the time at work if you don't have executing strengths that support that. My sister's in student affairs at a university in Chicago and does a lot of work with the Strength Finder. And she only has one executing strength in her top 10. And it's number 10 and it's arranger. So she's good at arranging people, but all of her strengths are in influencing and in relationship building. So she has things like harmony, empathy, developer. You know, developers really love to see growth. They can really hang in there with a low performer. Empathy's really good at telling how people feel. They can kind of walk in the room and get a vibe on what's going on for people. So she uses influencing and relationship building skills to get other people to do things for her. And all this time, I'm thinking, how do I always get roped in to her shenanigans? You know, I go back to Chicago for a little while. Next thing you know, I'm moving a piano from the next door neighbor's house. And I'm like, how did this happen? Oh, influencing relationship building, right? She can, talk her way into, when back in the 90s when NSYNC was big, she could talk her way into that concert without a ticket because her friend actually had the ticket and was inside. She convinced somebody to let her into a big stadium without a ticket. Like, there are people in our lives that just land on their feet and we don't know how they do it. And sometimes it frustrates those of us who, sort of follow the rules and work hard. They likely have those influencing strengths and they rope people in and next thing you know, you're their worker. Well, that's great. She's in student activities. She has to get students involved. So that's a great set of strengths for what she needs to do for her job, using those relationship strengths to connect with people and then influence them to do something. Strategic thinking is this final set of skills that is really about seeing where we need to go. There's a certain amount of people have that sort of dreamer ability where they can see the future. They know what mountain we're going to climb. They know this is where we're going to be going. And for some people, they're like, wow, that seems really overwhelming. I don't know how we're going to get there. It's because dreamers, and this is, futuristic. We think about the learner. People who love learning are often on the cutting edge because they enjoy that process of something new. So they're always seeking that out. So these people are looking forward of what are we going to do next? And that's great because it defines, it's sort of the next hill to climb. The problem is that if you have those strategic thinking themes, but no executing themes, you're not going to be able to get up that mountain, right? There are people with executing themes that, I have an assistant at camp who has not only achiever, but focus. It's like a double hit, achiever and focus. So she loves getting things done. She can stay on task with that focus till things are done. It doesn't really matter to her what she's doing, as long as she can be kept busy, like she gets through tasks so fast that she gets bored. So I have to keep giving her enough things to do. Well, that's an executor who's going to get me up the next mountain. She's happy if I say, no, we're going to go this way. She's like, great, bring the work on. That's why when we think about pairing dreamers and doers, the dreamers think about that hill to climb, but it's the doers that are going to remember, this is what we're packing, this is what we need to bring. They're going to have all the supplies that you need. Those are the combination of the executing themes. So when we start to think about our themes, it's not only on how ours work together, but the greater step is what kind of complementary partnerships do I need to be looking for at work in order to meet certain goals. In understanding that. For myself, I had a complementary partner at camp for 20 years who just retired a couple years ago, who had all the things that I didn't. She loved to do a lot of the detail-oriented work, which I'm not. As a corner cutter, do you really want me proofing the brochure? No. She could find all the mistakes. She'd find the smallest price that's been printed incorrectly. She'd reserve the rooms like 8 months in advance. And it was in our buildings in Strawberry Canyon, but she would have that on the calendar. And we worked really well together because I could do the training. I could do a lot of the big picture, this is where we're going. And together, we probably made it longer in each of our respective positions because we were allowed to work that way together. Because I could see an email come in where it was dealing with an angry parent, and that was harder for her to do. And even though it was her camp, if I saw the email, I could definitely answer that for her. And then she would proofread my, letters of recommendation or things that needed to go out because I'm a dreadfully horrible proofreader. And so that partnership at work really allowed both of us to stay employed and helped our department considerably because we were more productive by working together. I want to find out a little bit from your strengths. So this is going to be a stand-up. We're going to do several slides to see if one of these applies to you, you'll stand. And if it doesn't apply to you, you will sit. So it's thinking about how we think, what our talents are, how do we act most of the time. So stand up if you always talk to people in elevators, airplanes, stores. You love to talk to people. Make conversation. My husband is this way. It's great in a cab. That driver leaves me alone because he'll chit-chat. Great. Thank you. Have a seat. How many of you write down a list of things to do and stick to it? Yeah. See, we know why Achiever's the number one in the database, right? Thank you. Have a seat. How many of you need to pick someone to race while driving? You don't drive unsafe, but in your brain, you're like, that's my person. Walking down the halls, like you're racing somebody. Yeah, yay! How many of you look for a familiar face when you're at a big party, big networking event? You look for that familiar face. Yeah. Okay, thank you. How many of you have to clean your house before you can relax? Yeah, great. Have a seat. My house was never so clean as when I was working on my dissertation, let me just tell you. Stand up if you always are accused of being too nice. Too nice. Great. Thank you. How many of you are accused of not being nice enough? This would be me for sure. We can high five each other. Stand up if you always figure out the plot of the movie before anyone else does. Yeah. Thank you. Stand up if you push the elevator button to remind the elevator that you are there. Yes, thank you. Stand up if you have a color-coded or organized closet. Yes. Great, have a seat. How do you like to organize your closet? Who likes to organize their closet? How do you like to organize?
By type of clothes and the way that it hangs on the hanger.
Type of clothes and ways that it hang. Do you have
type of clothes and then color within.
Type of clothes and color?
Blouses with tank tops or no sleeves, short sleeves, long sleeves, sweaters.
Got it. So kind of like functionality. Yeah. How many of you are like, what are they talking about? Right? The clothes go from the dryer to the hamper. Sometimes they go on a hook, but you know what? I'm just going to wear them anyway, right? So this idea is that everyone has talent. You know, talent is this naturally occurring pattern of thought, feeling, or behavior that can be productively applied. This is Gallup's definition of talent. Anytime, that's one of the things that I, got drilled into me through my doctoral program at UC Berkeley, is always get an identification of terms. What does that word mean, talent? How are you defining that? And this is this naturally reoccurring pattern of thought. Now, this next activity, you'll need your piece of paper and you'll need a pen or a writing implement. There's probably some at the table if you don't have a writing implement. You can borrow a pen from the table up there. I know, who writes anymore? When I bring my phone, I don't even need a pen in my life, but some of you might be able to dig to the bottom of something you have. On your handout, there's a thing that says writing challenge, and that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to do next. So your neighbor might have a pen if you don't. There's some Sharpies. It's okay if it's a Sharpie. Just bring it back so if they need it the next time they'll have it. So Sharpies are okay. It'll just be something for you to write on. And if you need a handout, make sure you have one of those. All right, so everybody has something to write with. Okay, so you need the bottom of that page. What you're going to do in a moment, but not yet, I'm going to have you print your first, middle, and last name. So I'm going to time it. So in a moment, not yet, make sure everybody's ready. We'll time it. Let me get my handy timer. Okay. So, but ready? It's going to be first, middle, and last name, but you're going to use cursive and your non-dominant hand. So switch hands, non-dominant hand. Ready, go. See, almost everybody's done. Great. So, you're like, oh, that was really not a nice trick. Well, let's see how you do with your dominant hand. Now I'll just let you, however you want. If your name is a signature, if your name is printed, however you want to write your name, when I say go, you're going to write your name that way. And then when you're done, look up. Gosh, that was about a third of the time. A third of the time. Now, what did you notice in the room, even, about the difference from the first time to the second time? What was different? There's frowning. There was like some frowning. What else was there? Groaning. I heard some giggling, some laughing, right? Right? And then we think about that, when we use our talents, it does bring us energy. Whether you've taken the Strength Finder or not, if you want to be clued in to what your strengths are, think about what during the day brings you energy. Those moments when you're in the zone where all of a sudden you lost track of time. You realize, like, wow, that was something that was amazing. Make note of that. That's going to be a helpful indication for you of there's probably a couple of strengths being used at the same time. You keep track of those moments for the week, and you have to be specific. For me, I know if I get to talk to someone, especially somebody, a millennial that I connect with about their strengths and what they're going to do for a job, we have an inclusion camp for kids with autism. And so typically there's kids with autism, Asperger's, they often have like an interest, one fixated interest they could talk about forever. Well, that Strength Finder with millennials is I forget to check to see if they're even paying attention. I'm 20 minutes into talking about this and I realize oh my gosh, they zoned out. I lose space and time when I talk about what I love, and it's because a lot of my strengths are coming together at one time. And when you think about, that first time when you wrote with your non-dominant hand versus your second time, how much more productive you were. This idea, and Gallup does a lot of research on productivity and worker engagement. And when we use our strengths, we're more productive. We get more done. And just by looking at, of course, if I'm doing something that invigorates me, that brings me energy, that I enjoy doing, I'm going to do that more efficiently and probably longer, right? People have 20% extra discretionary effort to give in their day to their employer. And they do give their extra effort when it's in the area of their strengths, when it's something they're invigorated by. Now, this idea of talent versus skill, this talent is this piece of thing that we have that's occurring to us at an early age. You can see the corner cutter behavior in me at an early age. those are talents that I have, whereas skills are really the things that we can teach. So the question is, in a workforce, are we better off focusing on our talent, or are we better off focusing on what we're not really good at? I speak to a lot of companies on the Strength Finder, a lot of corporations, and they still have that mentality that we need to fix a weakness. That this is about, that's great, it's good, think about your performance review, right? It's 5 minutes on what you do well and the next, 50 on areas for improvement, right? Opportunities for growth, right? With focus on what you're not doing. This really came to pass for me in supervising. I have one direct report that I have worked with for the last 16 years who's worked for me for an extended period of time, and he's an outstanding teacher. This person connects with kids and teaches them in a way unlike any other teacher I've had. And yet he cannot do email or voicemail, which when you're a program director tends to be a problem because parents expect their calls to be returned. And so for a number of years into our beginning relationship, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to make him better at email and voicemail. And I got a little bit of growth, made some impact, but I realized this is beating a dead horse. It's just not gonna work. What we do now is he hires somebody on his team that has those organizational skills. It frees him up to do what he does best. It lets the person who has organizational skills make phone calls, get some practice with customer service, returning emails. And, and we had a 16-year-old doing that job for the last 2 years, and he was outstanding, returning phone calls and answering email. And that was much better than me fighting with this person to get him to try to get to a level that was acceptable. I just managed around something that he wasn't good at rather than try to make him good at that. So managing around a weakness and play to his strengths. Now, there's times where you can't do that. If his main job, if he was hired to check email and answer the phone, that was his main job responsibility, and he couldn't do that, I couldn't very well manage around it. I would either have to put him in a different position or manage him out. So I'm not saying that everybody that has a job needs to be, they're not good at that, you should find something else for them to do. If that's their job, they need a different job. They need you need to relocate them or help them transfer into jobs, something they're good at. But there's often times where we do have the ability within our work group to share some work tasks with people who like to do what we don't, and we like to do the things that they don't. And that partnership is what really allows us to be productive. When we think about focusing our training, and how should you focus your training, when you think about your own growth and development, how do you use this material in order to further your career? There's a study that they did on readers. It was people that are speed readers. It's an interesting group. So they took a group of people and they gave them a speed reading assessment to figure out how many words right at the base they could read per minute. And there's the first, they split them into two groups. The first time, the people that read about 90 words per minute, and then there was a group that read about 350 words per minute. So there's already kind of a group of talented speed readers. And they gave them a speed reading class, an intervention of we're going to teach you to read faster. Now, when we think about that, how did the first group do when they were given the class? They did get better. They did get a little bit better. But we think about how did the readers do that already had talent at what we were teaching them? They were already really good at this. They were actually already so much better than the first group who had the intervention. They were still better with no training at all than that person, right? How much better did they do? Right? Significantly better. I know, people are like, why does it go up to 3,000? Yeah. So when we think about how are we going to grow, my nephew, who is a natural connector, who is a natural networker, he is going to grow the most in that area. Now, does that mean we don't teach him to get things done or some of the other things? Of course we teach them that. But he's going to make the most growth in what he's already good at. When I tested kids in the middle school, I could see at 8th grade what strengths kids had and what they did well. Now, I need to boost up an area to make it an acceptable level. Everybody needs a certain level of reading and a certain level of math to get by. But at some point, you realize math's just not your thing. You enjoy reading, or you enjoy writing, or you're an amazing speaker, and that's where we should be using your strengths. Do we continue to hammer math and take away your recess, and right, to make sure to make sure you are going to have like an outstanding level of math? No, we're going to get you to an acceptable level for you to be a functioning adult, and then really hammer on what you're good at, because that is what's going to get you a job in life, is what your talents are. And when we think about what training we should be taking, I'm a horrible editor. I'm not great at finding typos. I just don't see them. Now, there's some of you in the room that you can look at a sheet of paper and the typo is basically red. You just see it. Where are those people? It's like jumps out at them, right? It's like a superpower I wish I could have. I've taken classes. I did fine on my grammar classes in 8th and 9th grade, but I don't remember it and I don't see it. So I thought taking classes would help me. It got me from awful to just really bad. And it took a lot of time. Now, is that really an efficient use of my time? Thankfully, my co-director was really good at that, and I use editmyenglish.com and pay money, my own money, to edit letters of recommendation that I do for my job. I'm not expecting somebody in my workplace to do it, and I have 14-year-olds in the summer that can edit better than me. But I pay money to do that because that's a weakness that's unacceptable for me to have in the workplace, and I have to figure out how to solve that problem. That's this idea of what kind of training do we focus on? What are we able to partner with somebody else to get that done? When you focus on a weakness, you're preventing failure, but when you're focused on a strength, you're really getting excellence in focusing on what people are good at. Now, Gallup in the Strength Finder and their movement is doing a lot with Healthways and well-being. And as we know on campus, the costs of healthcare and health insurance continue to go up. And anything we can do to create a more healthy work environment helps us all in our own costs in what we pay. And Gallup and Healthways have looked at, factors that make a great life. And they have these 5 factors: your purpose, your community, the social aspect, financial, and physical. And these are these Healthways WellBeing 5, this index. And they're mapping how people are using their strengths and how that connects to well-being and your overall health. And what they're looking at is that people that use their strengths, they report using their strengths, are 3 times as likely to report having an excellent quality of life. And as we go back, quality of life is based on these 5 factors. So they asked people, how much time did you get to use your strengths yesterday? And based on how many hours they report, they got a survey on their happy, different moods and feelings that they had. The more they used their strengths, the happier, they were more energetic, and they smiled and laughed more. And you're thinking, well, that's no kidding. I'm happier when I get to use my strengths, right? But look what happens when they are using their strengths least. There's more sadness, worry, and pain. And I see a lot of adults in the workplace who are either mismatched because their strengths don't match their job. And here at UC Berkeley, jobs have shifted. We all get moved around in trying to make do with less people. So we often end up in a job we didn't even necessarily sign up for in trying to get the work of the university done. If we really started to think about, well, how can we all, as in our small work team, is there a way we can divide tasks better? Is there a way I can have an understanding of what your strengths are so that I'm not annoyed by you all the time because you work slow? And maybe you work slow because you're great at the details, that I'm not. I'm a corner cutter. So, I'm an activator, corner cutter. I want to get started, I'll cut some corners and get it done. And when I have somebody on my team that's really good at risk assessment, they're kind of the brakes to my car. And they're like, before you fire off that email at the computer support guy, why don't we check and see if that's really his fault? That's the brakes. That's a deliberative consistency. I need careful people as a partner because they're like, let's look at that first. And oftentimes, he's prevented me from sending a few emails out of frustration when if I just took some time to look at the situation, that might not have been necessary. And that has taught me, by seeing that strength in action, by partnering with somebody, what it has done is now without that person, I'm able to slow down. I'm able to kind of internalize that careful person's thinking, internalize a strength I don't have by thinking about that. What we know about strength-based employees is when you are using your strengths, you learn, and this is based on Gallup measurements, is you're able to learn the role faster, you adapt to change more quickly, you're more productive, and you stay longer, and I'm definitely evidence of that. You miss less days of work, and you build stronger relationships. We know also, when we think stay longer, the cost of turnover is very high. The cost to not only hire a new person, but then train the new person and get them up to speed is very high. Imagine being on a work team where, gosh, if we just shifted the role a little bit, or if the manager just understood that I'm really great at thinking about things in depth, but that means I need the report the night before, not thrown at me at the meeting and expect to make a 15-minute decision. I don't work that way. And that idea of kind of, gosh, if my manager just understood that, if I could just get a little more time, a little more warning, you'd get the best of me because I'm a careful thinker, that would go a long way. So sometimes it's not even negotiating a role, but it's negotiating a relationship with a manager. And when we think about the different strengths, this idea, you think about a conductor. There's some people that are really good at getting the whole orchestra to play together. That's their strength. They're not necessarily the best percussionist or the best person on the violin, but they have a strength in getting people together. There's some people that are good in rallying troops and employees in times of crisis, or when there's something really emotional. They're going to be that person that stands up in the meeting when you're in your head thinking, this is a really bad idea, but it may not be your strength to sort of confront people appropriately in a meeting about a course of action. There's sometimes people on your team that are good at doing that, and that's helpful when you partner together. My co-director was somebody, she had harmony, so she didn't really like confrontation, but she'd worked at the university longer than me. And those people with that historical knowledge, those institutional knowledge, something would come up, they'd want us to do something, and she would know, like, well, we did that before, and this is what happened. But it was hard for her in a meeting to challenge another strong, assertive person, but I could see her uncomfortability, and I could then be the person that spoke up, made space in the conversation then to bring her in. It's that partnership that we have. We have some individuals that are really great in front of a group. Some people are nurturers of that small bits of talent. Developer is one of those themes that works well with people who are learning at the beginning stages of learning. I always try to partner with somebody with developer because they have patience where I don't. I have maximizer, and the maximizer really likes to take people from the 99th percentile to the 100th. Like it's that, I'm going to get people that last 1%. Whereas developers happy with any place on the range, they're even happy with somebody at the 2nd percentile, and they, by golly, will work all year to get them to the 3rd percentile. That is some strong patience. And I don't have that. But that's not great as a manager. When I have new people working for me, trying to learn systems in an office in a chaotic environment, when I don't have the patience to teach them, I always make sure I have a developer partnered with me because they will be able to get that person up to speed and have patience where I don't. Some people, I think processing speed is something we don't consider, and it's independent of our talents. Some people do just need more time to think, and other people have a strength that requires more time. I think of consistency. If you're a corner maker, you need some time. Right, a corner cutter is going to work faster, but it's because they're cutting corners, right? They're taking steps off of that path. And that idea of, taking the time, deliberative is another one. Those are a couple careful themes I like to partner with because I'm a corner cutter and I know that's not good. So I need somebody that is the brakes to my car that says, let's think about this, slow down. What do we need to do? And that person helps me quite a bit. There's often people that are influencers in your group that get everybody excited to get going and motivate you. Understanding how those people are can help you be more engaged at work, and more importantly, knowing which of those are you. Are any of those your themes? Gallup in the research has looked at engagement, and engagement is when people are engaged, they are giving their discretionary effort at work. They are psychologically committed, they're more productive, they're more likely to stay with their company for at least a year, though that's engaged employees. And Gallup has the Q12, and for a number of years, if you took, there was that survey, remember we were doing that survey every year? I can't remember the name of it. It was once a year we would do that. We would get like data from year to year. There was actually the Q12 questions were wrapped into that survey for a while. And there were things like, do you feel like you have the resources to do your job? Does somebody at work talk with you about your progress? So there's 12 questions, and based on how you answer those 12 questions, you're going to fall into one of these categories. Engaged, not engaged, or actively disengaged. And in the U.S. workforce, 30% of the workforce is engaged at work. 52% is not engaged, and these individuals are just psychologically disconnected. They're not necessarily going, they're doing their job and they're leaving. We've all worked with those sorts of individuals. They're not going to do any more than they're asked. And then there's 18% of the U.S. workforce that are physically present but psychologically absent. They're unhappy with their work situation, and what's worse is they want to make sure you know it. These are those toxic individuals that are ruining it for everybody else. As we call it at camp, don't pee in the pool, right? You're ruining it for everybody else. So when we think about, just think about a boat with 10 people rowing in it. You've got 3 working their hardest. You got 5 just kicking it. They're not hurting you, but they're certainly not helping. And then you've got about 2 people like kicking the oars out of the people that are trying to row, right? So anything we do that moves people into an engaged category and out of the actively disengaged category helps the whole boat. Anything we do that can get people more engaged at work helps the whole boat. If a manager talks about the strengths with their direct report, that increases as an 8-fold increase in your engagement. That's one thing a manager can do, and that will move people into the higher categories. Talk about your strengths at work. Managers have a big role. That's why I was curious how many of you are manage people, because managers play this most significant role in driving engagement. All those Q12 questions, do I have what I need to do my job? Do I have a best friend at work? Is somebody talking with me at work about my strengths? Does my boss seem to care about me as a person? These engagement questions. The manager controls 76%. They have that much of an effect. And when we think about it, if a manager controls that much of my work life, and they really control who's throwing the oars out versus who's actually rowing, who's named manager is really the most important position an organization makes, is who they put in that role of manager. It has so much control over the financial outcome because it controls turnover, worker productivity. That manager has a lot of effect. And talking about strengths, that one thing they do makes a difference. Here's some statistics from Gallup. If you have a manager that ignores you, there's a 40% chance you will be actively disengaged. So if they're ignoring you, there's a 40% chance you're kicking the oars out of the boat. If a manager gives you negative feedback, there's only a 22% chance you're kicking the oars out of the boat, right? 40% if you're getting ignored. If they're negative, your life has improved. It's better off to have a negative manager than one that ignores you. At least you know where you stand. But if a manager acknowledges your strengths, gives you strength-based coaching and feedback, gives you the ability to showcase your strength, there's only a 1% chance you're going to be actively disengaged, and a 60% chance you will be fully engaged at work. So it's not rocket surgery about what a manager needs to do to help the university save money. Talk about strengths. Become a strength-based team. That's going to make a difference in your overall turnover and your overall productivity, which helps you get more done. Now, what's interesting is Gallup has moved into, with Purdue, the university setting. And they are trying to see what makes for a great college experience that then translates to a worker being engaged at work. If really the ultimate goal for you as a worker is to be engaged at work, answer those questions. Do I have the tools to get my job done? Does somebody care about me as a person? These 12 questions, you answer positively, you're engaged at work, and your life is better. Well-being improves, health improves. Gallup wanted to know, based on a school setting, is there things that universities can do to make an impact on how those students will have be an engaged worker later in their life? And they took on this huge study. It's a free report you can get online, and talking to students from those that were just out of school all the way to people in their 80s to find out what their school experience was like and then what their job experience was like. And what they found was graduates who felt emotionally supported during college have more than double the odds of being engaged in their work, and they're 3 times as likely to be engaged in their well-being. So emotionally supported. So what were those questions? At least they answered these positively. At least one professor made me excited about learning. They also answered positively, professors cared about me as a person. Now we hear those same engagement questions. They just tweaked their worker engagement questions to apply to students. And a mentor who encouraged my hopes and dreams. These 3 things changes a graduate's health and engagement at work. And think about yourself, where you fit into the chain of supporting students here at the university and supporting the mission of students. We often, directly and indirectly, support one of these pieces. Sometimes we're working with professors that is allowing them to spend time with students. Those are if we're in that supportive role, or we may actually be working with students ourselves, or sometimes, I mean, as far as a mentor goes, you know, oftentimes in graduate school, the person that you meet, that assistant that works in the office, sometimes are closer to you than your professor because they see you struggling. They're the person that helps you along the way. The other large metric they found, that graduates who experienced deep learning had more than double the odds of being engaged in work, and they were more likely to thrive. And that was having long-term projects that took more than a semester or more to complete. They had an internship or job where they applied their learning, and they were extremely involved in extracurricular activities and organizations. Wow, this says a lot if you're in student activities, doesn't it? To be extremely involved in extracurricular activities and organizations improves their well-being. And overall, when they answered these positively, there was a 14% overall worker engagement, and then 6% when they had more learning experiences in terms of how they answered those questions. So what you're learning and taking in here today has a lot of implications at different points along the way. The question for yourself is thinking about, what can you do next? What brings you energy? What is it where do you want to go from here? You have on your sheet 3 questions that you can answer. I'm going to go through a couple options, and I'm going to give you a second to write some notes down for yourself. A lot of people are, wondering where they go next. And one of the things on your sheet, there's information on how to take the Strength Finder if you haven't done it yet. And I can answer some of those questions. Before you write down what your kind of goals are, a couple things that people do is to take notes during the day of those moments where you have that zone moment where you realize you just lost space and time doing something. It could have been helping somebody on the phone. It could have been helping a student. It might have been talking to a coworker and helping them figure something out. And be specific. I helped so-and-so figure out how to use the copier, and I just felt great. You're going to write those little moments down, because what you're starting to see as you do that is you'll start to see the thread, is then you look at your strengths and go, which strength was I using when I was doing that? Was it developer? Was it empathy? Because I really saw they were struggling with it, and nobody likes to fight with a copier when they're on a last minute deadline. And so I could feel that. You're going to start to see like, oh, now I know which strength that was. You'll start to know what drives you. Another thing you can do is kind of look at the strengths of you and those that you work with, and kind of really start to understand perhaps what they bring that's different from you. Sometimes we have a good sense of what we bring, but we can be really frustrated with some of our coworkers that bring something different than we do. Sometimes it's because they're using a strength that's different than ours. And when we kind of shift and realize, well, they're really not trying to bug me. They're really just thinking the way they think best, and that happens to be different than I do. That could be something for you to do. Another thing is to use your strengths in each, kind of focus on one strength during the week. You can read about it online. You can look it up on Gallup. There's YouTube videos on it. I'll show you. But there's a couple things that you can do, and I'm going to give you a minute or two just to take some notes on your sheet. and you should have these questions. What you learned today that was important to you. And it could have been in the beginning, you talked with somebody, you talked with a partner, and that was the most meaningful thing. It doesn't have to be something I said. Why was that nugget important to you at this time? Could be what's going on at work, but there's a reason that was a light bulb moment for you. And as a result of that, what is it that you're going to do this week? A very tangible, I'm going to go find my Strength Finder results. What is it that you're going to do this week? So I'm going to give you about a minute or two just to make a couple notes, and then I'm going to go over with you some resources that you have available. So a couple of resources that are available to you. If you look on your sheet, there's information on how to take the Strength Finder. If you haven't done it, or if you have a coworker, you're like, you need to take this. Strength, remember there's only one assessment, but there's different ways into that assessment. The education portal is called Strength Quest. It's not very pretty. This is the business side. The business side's very pretty because companies pay a lot of money to make it pretty. Strength Quest is the education site, and the code, if you buy it there, is only $9.99, under $10 if you buy it at Strength Quest. You get an ebook that's related to education and career growth. You get all the stuff on the Strength Quest site, and you get to take your Strength Quest login and use it on the business site. If you buy the code on the business site, you don't get to go to the education site. So it's better just to use the clunky site for $9.99 and then come over here when you're done with the assessment. Because the business site has videos, it has handouts. They do have these on the education site, they're just harder to find. So you get that one code and you get to use it at different places. So you'll be able to watch videos as well. There's also a YouTube channel. They're on their second season of taking one strength and talking about it for an hour. So that's another great way to be able to do that. And then we're going to be running on April 5th. We're going to be running a actual Strength Finder workshop where you get to, I'll go through a workshop that I do that really helps you utilize and understand what those strengths are. We'll do a lot of activities around your actual personal results. So you need to have Strength Finder results to come to that workshop on April 5th.
Same time, same place, and we encourage you to bring your coworkers, colleagues, and your manager, and you can all learn about that together as a team.
And they're also recording this, so hopefully this will be available if you want somebody to come and you'd like them to catch up. You're able to do that. My contact information is on that piece of paper. Just remind me where I met you if you email, because I have everything from students to parents to camp parents. So it just helps if you put that in context. But I love, UC has been my home for over 20 years, and I know what it takes to work with limited resources. And it's a lot about creating partnerships and helping each other, because really to love what you do and feel like it matters, how can anything be more fun? I mean, that's what we all want, and that's why we stay committed here, because we see that sense of fun and purpose in what we're doing. So thank you for coming today. If you have any questions, come on up and I can address those individually.